and see the data source selected as OS type. And we have a few things here. We have output columns, which are essentially the rows that we're going to be receiving as data. Parameters, which in this case we have none, but they would be inputs into our data queries. Filters, which you can filter expressions for different to get different results. And then we have the preview results button, which will allow us to see, preview what the results would be when we run this report. And by default, we have Windows, Linux, and Unix. Now, where's this data coming from? You see here, this is the column OS, and it's coming from our script because we know it's a scripted data source. So under script, we have different options. We have open, describe, fetch, close, so on and so forth. Now, instead of going through each one of these scripts to find out where there's data located, we can actually go to the property editor here, select the advanced tab, and look towards the right column under the value column. And if we see any data in here that's associated with a property script, like fetch in this case, and open, we know there's actually going to be data listed there. So all the magic really happens in fetch. So we go to fetch. We see here we have our rows outputting to our columns of OS. So if you select the first option, essentially 0, it's 0 based. You select the first option, we'll have Windows as 0S type. You select the second option, it'll be Linux as 0S type. You select the third option, it'll be Unix. And it's returning true, which means that's the result. Otherwise, if it's not any of those, it's false. You didn't select one that's appropriate. So this is where the magic happens on the OS type selections. Now, if I go and open a report and let's say run it, let's go ahead and do that for now. If I open up one of these reports, and I'm going to open up ITM CPU utilization single resource, we're going to have a red X indicator here. And if we open up our data sources and sets and parameters, we see some red X's. And that's because BERT doesn't know of the location of our resources folder, which is right here. And how do we inform BERT of this? We go to Window, Preferences, and under the Report Design Twisty, we expand, and we see Resource as an option. We select our folder, and this is where we're going to need to recall the location of the workspaces that we set up when starting BERT. In my case, it's under My Documents, Workspaces, BERT. And you have our our resource project of ITM, and our folder of OS. Underneath that, we have our ITM 621 and resources, and that's what we need. We need that folder. So click OK, Apply, OK. Now we need to close this report and open it up back again for it to evaluate for the errors to go away. So we go ahead and do that. Open it again. And now we see no red X's anywhere. So that means we're good to go. Now if we go ahead and preview this report right now, which we can by hitting the preview tab here. There's many different ways, and this is one of them. It's going to take a second. And it's going to ask us for parameters. And here in the parameters selection, we have Windows, Linux, and Unix. Now, first of all, one thing I noticed, they're not very pretty. It's lowercase. I want to see them in uppercase. And second thing I noticed, they're not in alphabetical order. If I have a large list, I would like them to be in alphabetical order. Alright. And then if I look at server name as selected Windows, I see primary :ITM :NT as my server, as a Windows server. But that's not very pretty either. I wanted to show the host name, ITM. So how do we go about doing those two things? First, sorting them alphabetically, and as well as for both the OS type and server name, and then making the names look pretty when we select them. So we'll just click cancel here. That was just to show it to you. We go back to our layout tab here, and I'll show you how to make those changes. But we want to make those changes so that every report will have the display name show as we like, and also have it sorted alphabetically. So instead of making the change here at the report level, we're going to make the change at the library level. So the first thing we're going to do is notice a few things. We have this OS type, which gives the different options. And we also have this report parameter in this resource selection OS type. Now this is called a cascading parameter group because one parameter depends on another. The server name depends on which OS type you select, which makes sense. But if we look over this OS type, we see it's associated with a dataset, our OS type dataset, and the value and display text. So how do we change the display text? Is by changing this field here. We changed the display text, and it will show whatever row, or whatever column is part of the OS type dataset as the display. So the value is what shows in the background or passed as an argument, so that we can still key off of the lowercase Windows and lowercase Unix and such values in the reports, and they still run properly. And we're also going to show a different text to the front-end user when they select the parameter from the report, which is exactly what we want to do. So we need to create a new row of values for our OS type, so that we can create a new column to select in the parameter. So what we do here is we go back to our OS type dataset, and we create a new row. And this is very easy. We just go, it's going to be called row. We give it any name we want. In this case, I'm going to call it OS label. I spelled that wrong. And we're going to set it for Windows. We're going to set it a capital W, Windows. Make sure you end in a semicolon, because this is JavaScript. And we're going to do the same here in Linux, uppercase L, end in semicolon, and same here with Unix, uppercase U, end in semicolon. Okay, so now we have a new row of values, but we still only have one column of outputs here. Well, we need to make a new column, so how do we do that? So we double click on the OS type data set. We go to output columns, and we make a new one. Now, it needs to be typed exactly as the name of the row, OS label, and we're going to give it a type string, because that's what it is. And we're going to give it a display name of capital OS label. And this is so that we can distinguish it between other rows inside of BERT. Instead of seeing it based on the name of the output column, we can show a display name in the same way. And I'm going to change the OS. Instead of being OS, we'll call it OS value, so we can distinguish the two. This doesn't affect anything in the back end, just affects the way it's displayed in BERT. So we do preview results, and now we see OS value is lowercase and OS label is uppercase, exactly as we want. Click OK and save. Okay. So now if we expand our OS type, we do have the two columns, OS value, OS label. So we're going to go and change our OS type resource selection.